Welcome. I'm Julian Pistorius. I work at the University of Arizona at the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. I'm a software engineer by trade, and I work with researchers to help solve computational research problems that can benefit from cross-functional teams. So I really enjoy my work, and that's how I met many of the folks I hang out with in places like Research Bazaar, which I will plug at the end, and other ways to make contact with us and collaborate on stuff or just ask questions. So yeah, great to see you all here. Please go ahead and ideally unmute, show you a video. This will be recorded and we'll go onto YouTube. Just had to mention that. So if showing your video helps us see if you're struggling and helps the instructors gauge how things are going. So, but not required, but it would really help us if you do that. So yeah, go ahead. I don't know if you, Christina, do you so as I mentioned, this will be recorded. I would like it if you kept your cameras on. I do understand if other things happen in the background and you need to handle an emergency situation or something like that, please do feel free. We'll have a half-hour break in the middle somewhere when we decide that we're tired and have a good stopping point. Otherwise, this will go until 2 p.m. Arizona Standard Time. And let's see. So I think the first thing to do is to on the right-hand side of this HackMD, if you've got it in this double view, which is if you hover over this thing, you click on that, you'll see that there's also a rendered view of the HackMD. If you click on that, it will launch. It'll look like this. I'll launch something. This is the environment that we're going to run the SQL commands in, that we're going to be learning. So this sometimes can take a little while. I want you to just actually start running, getting that going. Yours will probably not look like that. It's because I block things. Hopefully this all works. Yours will actually show some text, not some blurry things. Okay. And so, by the way, while that's happening, please feel free to ask questions in the chat of this, and or have questions. We can also have questions here. Feel free to use this as a shared note-taking area. And anybody feel free to answer questions if you think you know it. This is probably also where I will paste in challenges. We'll have little hands-on exercises to check to see how we're understanding the concepts. So we go here. Mine is still going. Is anybody's finished launching yet? Jessica, okay, that's good.
Were some error messages of some kind? I just clicked on them, but it seems to have figured itself out.
Yeah, sometimes it's a little bit glitchy, but
I launched just fine, I think.
I can't. What link am I supposed to grab here?
You can do one of two things. You can there's a link there called Binder, Launch Binder, and it's this long one. Or you can. I
tried that and it didn't.
What does it show for you?
Oh, I already closed it, but it had some.
What you can also do is if you click on the repository link, it'll go to the repository, and then on the repository on the README, you'll see that there's a Launch Binder link right there, and that goes to the same place. So for reference, this repository link is I have forked the Data Carpentry SQL lesson for ecologists repository, and I modified it to use a series of notebooks, Jupyter notebooks that we'll use with a SQL inside it. If you do want to go back and look at all the, there's like a whole self-paced notebooks in there. We won't do that during this workshop, but you can use this afterwards. If we may not cover everything, but if there might be some advanced topics that you can go through there. So this is a good one to bookmark and go through yourself later. So Sue, have you clicked on the Launch Binder link and has it started showing something?
I have a GitHub page up.
Okay, and then can you click on this Launch Binder? So while we're sort of waiting for things to happen, I don't know if anybody's ever been to a software carpentry. I see mine's now working. Ever been to a software carpentry workshop or a data carpentry workshop? And sometimes to give, oh yeah, is that the same error that maybe Jessica got? Yeah, just ignore that. Just click through.
Mine actually does not look like that.
What do you see?
I see, I guess, notebooks, console, other, and some square buttons.
Do you see, maybe you should share a screen, because you should see, ideally, if you go to notebooks and you double click on the work.ipnb, that's the workshop notebook we're going to
Got it.
Got it?
That showed up. Okay.
All right. So we're going to use some of the Zoom features to use like the equivalent of, yes, I'm struggling, or no, I'm not struggling, I'm fine. And if you go to, I think it's the participants pane, and then, or somewhere there's like a reaction emoji. I'm in a presenter view, so I'm not sure where to do that.
It's at the bottom of the Zoom screen. There's like a little reactions button in the lower right-hand corner.
Yeah,
you click on it, then it gives you options.
Yeah, so what I would like is for everybody who sees this this workshop notebook successfully to do a little yes, a green yes reaction. And if you don't, then a little red one. And then we can identify who's struggling. Okay. Jessica, could you, so you were able to see it? You're able to see it? Can you do a yes? And then Courtney, are you still waiting for something? Can you show a little practicing the reaction? Excellent. So we're just waiting for Sue. Are you seeing it yet? It's still launching.
I get to your GitHub page.
And so on the GitHub page,
yeah.
If you scroll down to the README, it says Data Carpentry SQL for Ecologists. And just above it, you see this Launch Binder button. What happens if you press that?
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
It appears to be I see the lesson. Okay. Okay, binder.
Mm-hmm.
Click that. I think I'm on it.
Excellent.
It was taking me kind of further back than I needed to be. Like all the way to your GitHub page.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know.
All right. Okay, so you can all lower the equivalent of the green stickies, as we used to call them, so you can turn off the yeses. Okay. So a little bit of business before we start into this. You'll see that at the top of this workshop notebook, there is something called Enable Jupyter Logger. This is optional. This is the software that Samuel George, who's in this thing, he developed as a way for us as workshop facilitators to keep track of how participants are doing as they work through the notebook. This is completely anonymized. This environment is running all on the same environment, so there's no way to distinguish between really. It's not running on your laptop or anything like. It's sending events of the notebook cells as we execute them, as we run them, to a service in North Carolina, and then there's a dashboard that Sam is looking at, and other facilitators just can look at to see how the the workshop is progressing. So if you're willing to have your anonymized notebook activity for this notebook workshop to be sent to George, please execute those cells, and that works by, if you press on the, say, workshop notebook, for people who haven't used notebooks before, I like to use the hold shift down and press enter. And you'll see it moves down, and that has run that cell, it's executed that cell. Now that first cell happens to be just a markdown cell, so it won't show anything fancy. But if you keep going, so if I press shift enter now, it goes to the next one. If I go shift enter now, it goes to the next one. Now is the first cell is actually going to do something. And this cell, because it has this exclamation mark in the beginning, it's a special kind of shell, Jupyter shell magic, and it can run shell commands inside a Jupyter notebook. And this command is going to copy the source code from the package into this notebook directory. So you'll see it's going to, if I press now, you'll see that on the left here, if I do this little refresh, there, oh, did it actually do anything? It doesn't look like it's shift enter. My kernel may be not so happy. Resternal and clear all outputs. Is anybody else, has anybody else gone through that and actually it shows up? I'm going to refresh mine. Hang on.
I just typed out my experience in the chat, but I had to restart the kernel. I went to the kernel, restart kernel and clear all outputs. And then it asked me if I wanted to restart it. And I said yes. And then I was able to execute all the cells.
Okay, so I pressed the browser refresh button and it seemed to do the same thing. And so now you can see there's got a little 1 next to my cell there, and logger has showed up there. So that is the software for the logging. Now you do not have to do this if you don't want to. Do encourage you to do it if you don't mind, and feel free to ask Sam, George, some questions in the chat if you want to know more about it, if you want to use it for your own workshop. Okay, so then the next cell, I'm going to shift enter on it. So this is going to start logging the work, and you'll see that you now refresh, you'll see a JSON file there. That is where the events, for going to every cell, the events will be saved there, and they will then be sent to UNC. And this is the unique identifier for this workshop. And that's it. So everything from now on in this notebook that I am running will go to this dashboard that the workshop facilitators can monitor. Any questions about that? Is anybody struggling?
There's a question in the chat.
Okay, let me see if I don't have the chat open. I should. Okay.
I think your screen is showing up small.
Small as in it's too high resolution.
The font is not big enough to read easily. Thank you.
Thank you very much for mentioning that.
Julian, could you clarify? So how do I know a cell is run? It's got the 1 and the 2 next to it instead of the blank?
Yes, exactly. So if I keep going down, if I go here and I press shift enter, now it's actually executed that cell again. Now it says 3.
Oh, okay.
Now we're going to the required bit of the setup. The other way to do this is to just click on it, and I think run the selected cells and advance. But if you hold down shift and press enter, it does the same thing. Any other questions? Anybody? So everybody who has managed to execute some cells, please do the little yes reaction so that we can check. Okay. Courtney, are you good? Okay, Kathy and Sue, how far are you? Have you managed to get that Jupyter Notebook launched?
I have. I just can't find my thumbs up or my yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that's something that's important to know where it is. That'll help us.
I'm like, it's there. I see what you're doing. I'm following, but where's my thumbs up?
Yeah.
You can use a manual method and just go like this.
True. Yes. Okay. So you can all do the remove your yes reactions. Okay. So let me now get to the. I wish that this wasn't always in the way. I'm gonna have to do something to move this.
Yeah, juggling different windows when teaching can be really challenging. So
yeah, and I don't do these often enough. So I just want to make sure that everybody can still see this Jupyter Notebook screen where it says setup required and work below here. Okay, good. Thank you. And what I need to do is
Yeah, it's tough to have enough real estate on the laptop for the Zoom.
yeah. I should have had this. Screen stuff all started out earlier. Unfortunately, I didn't actually have. Christina graciously created the Zoom for me, but the downside is that I'm kind of like a passenger in my own workshop. So lesson learned. Oh, Young Park has entered the waiting room. We have another person. It says my sharing is paused and to bring my sharing window to the front. Is that what other people see?
you can still see the setup required and workflow here window.
Okay. Okay.
I see it as well. Yeah.
Okay. Good. So hi, Young. Please show your video and introduce yourself quickly. And can somebody please paste the HackMD into the chat so he can join and catch up?
Oh, hi, sorry.
Oh, sorry, you.
Yeah, got the meeting time wrong. I'm Jung Mi. I'm a master's student in library and information science and working at UITS now. So always trying to learn more SQL.
Excellent. I was really glad to have you here. Yep.
Yeah,
that's fine. I'm Julian, and I work at the University of Arizona at the College of Ag and Life Sciences. I'll be presenting this. Chris Schnaufer is one of the helpers, and let me get you could somebody place the HackMD into the chat? So
I have the.
You have it? Okay, sorry, I see there. There's it. Mine's that chat window was slightly below where it should be. Okay, so why SQL databases? You're here probably because you think that you need it. I think it's probably one of the most useful skills a software engineer or data scientist or anybody dealing with data and needing to ask questions of data can use. I was just actually telling a friend this morning that I'm doing this workshop, and he told me that he loves SQL now. He didn't used to. He used to be an analyst on Wall Street, and he was an absolute wizard at Excel. And now he uses both. So this is not a replacement for Excel. This works really well with Excel. You'll see that the data that we use are exports from spreadsheets. And oh, thank you very much, Christina. And that the data that we'll be using come from spreadsheets. You can then also export data from your SQL database and then keep using Excel that way. But it just gives you the ability to deal with data, lots of data, like potentially billions of records. The database that we'll be using is called SQLite. It is one of the simpler database engines, extremely powerful, but I think the theoretical maximum database size is like 160 terabytes, which is a lot. And so this is definitely suitable for production data usage. So so what we'll learn is how to talk to SQL databases. There's this language called SQL, which stands for Structured Query Language, and this allows us to interact with databases. There are the different flavors of SQL that you might run into in production in your life will be all more or less the same. So if you learn one flavor of SQL, you can apply to others. So I don't know, Young might use MySQL and Microsoft SQL Server or Oracle, and you can transfer that knowledge relatively easily once you know there are like low idiosyncrasies or special features in different databases that you can use. The one we're using today, SQLite, was heavily inspired by Postgres SQL, which is one of my other favorite database engines, really powerful for if you need multi-user concurrent access to data, and often back some of the biggest websites and web applications in the world. So it's definitely a useful skill to learn. So any questions so far? Please feel free to add them to the HackMD at the
Julian, I did have a question about the different flavors that you mentioned of SQL. Is there an analogy that I'm to something else that I might be more familiar with, like different flavors of, like, I don't know, I feel like R is R and Python is Python.
Yeah.
But why is SQL so many kinds? Is it? Yeah.
So, well, I'll let it mull in my background, see if there's any variation I can think of. Anybody else who may think of it, I know that Chris has a lot of experience with SQL. So the reason why there are so many flavors, I think, is because even though there is an ANSI standard, American National Standards Institute, ANSI SQL, and all of them pretty much support it, every database vendor has an incentive to add some special feature that makes the way they do things more appealing, perhaps, maybe some better way to deal with money, or external data sources, or some sorts of things. So then this sort of an arms race happens where, how do I distinguish myself from some other vendor? And then the other thing is, these databases, if you get really hooked into the very database specific flavor of SQL, it becomes sticky. So it makes it harder, more expensive for people to migrate from one to another. One of my first projects as a software engineer was for a big university in New Zealand, and they wanted to move their academic student management system from one system to another. And one was backed by Oracle, and the other one was a database, and the other was backed by Microsoft SQL Server. So my job was writing the data transformation in SQL that was continuously migrate data across, so that when they're ready to switch over to this new student management system, they could do so. And so I had to learn both, and I had to learn the idiosyncrasies of both. But yeah, it's yeah, with the right reference and cheat sheet, it's relatively straightforward to use them. So but I can't think of another example of where there is such a brazen changing. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, Ryan mentioned that it's a bit like different plotting libraries. Okay. So the first thing, so you're seeing this, where you can't see this. So let's talk about the data set that we're going to use. So if you click on this next cell, see that in this setup required, so it says copy the original data set to folder notebooks. We're going to go Shift Enter on that cell. you may have to restart your kernel. Yeah. And then, so you'll see that there, if you click on this cell and run that cell, you'll see that you refresh on the left here, you'll see a data directory. So if you see a data directory, please do a yes.
Oh yeah, and quick note: if you restart the kernel, if you want to turn on logging, you have to rerun that. Not just the second one, that one again.
Oh yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll try and move a little bit faster between these cells so that the kernel doesn't time out. I think that might be a problem with the binder service. Okay. So then you'll see this. So Jessica, do you see a data directory? Sue, Kathy, Young? Young, if you see a data directory, you weren't here for when we practiced the feedback. So if you can do an action or a reaction at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a react by saying yes. If everybody who can see the data directory, please give a yes reaction, and we'll know that everybody's up to speed. Sue, do you know where the reaction is?
Yeah, I don't quite have the same view on my left panel as you. I just have.
So if you press this, if you click on this file browser,
yeah,
click on that and it expands it. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Okay.
So then if you double click into this window here, you'll see that there are 3 CSV files and another file. If I expand this a little bit, it says Portal Mammals SQLite. So that is the database file that we're going to play with, and it's constructed out of these CSV files. So let's look at the species file first. So if you double click on the species.csv file, you'll see filter to CSV file has 4 columns. And then if we look at plots, this is different plots. Christina can probably, if she doesn't mind, explain what these means. Christina used to work in the lab that created this data set. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about this data set? I'm not an ecologist, but Christina is.
Yeah, so basically, actually, it's in Arizona, out east in the Chiricahuas. They have this field site called Portal. And so what they did is they set up a bunch of plots. I think there's 24 that are fenced off. And so some of them, they have little doors in the fences so that things like rodents can get in and out of the plots. And then other ones, they have them with no doors, so entirely fenced off to try to keep out all of the bigger like mammals from the sites. And so then it's comparing the impacts of basically excluding rodents of different sizes from the different sites. So. Yeah.
Thank you. And then so there's also a surveys. So these surveys, so as I understand it, there is a date and then linked to the plot. So this plot ID in this column, so we call these fields in database. So this species had 4 fields, plot CSV has 2 fields, and then survey has, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 fields. And so this plot ID here corresponds to the plot ID here. So you can see for that plot, there was a species ID. That species ID corresponds to, which was it, NL. So this one. So it was a kind of rodent. Christina can probably tell me what that is. And what the sex was, and the hind foot length, and then how much it weighed. And so then you can see, okay, so there was all of these different measurements starting all the way back in 1977. And if we scroll down, you'll see that sometimes there's a weight, sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's a sex, sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's a hind foot length, and sometimes there's not. So the data is like all data, not always complete. And but we're assuming it's correct. So I think it's something like 38,000 surveys, observations, going up all the way to 2002. We'll probably keep doing this. So 35, almost 36,000. Because he says those gaps can happen when someone drops a rodent that they're measuring. So yeah, research is a human pursuit. Things happen. Okay, and so what we want to do with these is, how do we ask questions like, have a look at those CSV files yourself, and then say, figure out yourself, see if you can notice anything in the data. And let's say we have 3 questions. I'm going to copy this into the HackMD. You can see this. Let's say you had those questions. How was the hindfoot length and species? Whoopsie. How is the hindfoot length and weight of the Dipodomys, I hope I pronounced that, species changed over time? And what is the average weight of each species per year? What information can you learn about the Dipodomys species in the 2000s over time? So those are the kind of questions. So if you look at these things, see if you can figure out what would you need to answer those questions. What are those sort of things that you would, concepts or information maybe, and feel free to then put your answers into the HackMD here. Any ideas what you would need? What sort of things would you have to do to the data? Or maybe categorize the data somehow, or somebody's typing that we have to join surveys and species, so we know which species is, yeah, exactly, it's Dipodomys. Oh, I love kangaroo rats. Somebody said select only the genome Dipodomys. Okay, so what does that look like, right? So oh, yeah. So this is multiple species are in the Dipodomys genus. Yeah, exactly. So that's interesting, right? So if we wanted to join surveys and species, we would have to join surveys and species on multiple species IDs, right? Because this DM, DO, DS, and DX are the species IDs for the Dipodomys genus. So we want to be able to join with the surveys, find all the surveys where the species ID was DM, DO, DX, which was the other one? DM, DO, DS, and DX. Right, so it's not even like a single species ID. So we have to join with multiple values from the species ID. We have to find that. We don't necessarily want to hard code that, because if we have, let's say we add another species, some new species was discovered or something, or added to this survey, we don't want to hard code that, for example. So we have to base on the genus, for example, so that it captures all of the species. Does that make sense? Okay. So some of the other things that we, let's see. Some of the other things we may want to do is we may want to like select a subset of the data, right? So we want to subset both on rows and columns. We care about the rows that have that based on that genus. We want to be able to group subsets of data together, and we want to be able to do math. So nobody's mentioned that though yet. Is we're going to you have to do math over this because somehow you're going to be able to track like numbers, do some sort of average. For example, here is what is the average? That is a mathematical operation. And that's the other thing that we need to do. Trends, yep. Math and other calculations. And then combine data across, yeah, and we mentioned data across different spreadsheets. And we definitely don't want to do this manually. We want to be able to do it in a repeatable, reproducible way that is not hand curated, error prone, so that we can run this again next year, do the same calculation as new surveys come in. We ideally want to be able to do this once. And this is the kind of thing, that SQL is great for, is being able to do that analysis in a repeatable way as new data comes in. So in business world, you know, how do I calculate the sales figures for the last quarter? I shouldn't have to hand curate the sales figures next quarter. Just do it, do it once, and then as the data changes, let's rerun it. So let's see, friends at a time. Okay, anything you noticed? Any observations? Any suggestions? Any comments? Okay. So the next thing is, so some of the reasons we use relational databases is that it can keep your data separate from your analysis. That you don't, if you keep your files in CSV files like we have it here, and you don't modify the CSV files, you import them into a SQL database or bring data in from elsewhere, you can run and manipulate and do the queries here and then export the results, and it's in a reproducible way. So it sort of separates the analysis from the data modification step or data management step a little bit. So you're not actually querying and modifying something like you would in a spreadsheet. You can definitely update the data there, but what I would do is I would create a new table or based on the results from some other query, and then I work on that. So there. Now we're going to, okay, so let's see. We're going to back to our work.ipnb, and hopefully this is still active for me. Nope. Oh my goodness, Binder. Okay, restart my kernel. Apologies. And I'm going to run this logging step again. And then I don't have to run this step again because the files are already there. But if you go down to the load ext SQL and run that step, that is an extension for Jupyter that allows us to directly connect to databases and run and write SQL commands in Jupyter cells, the way that we were able to run a bash or a shell command in a Jupyter cell like here. And this cell here, config SQL Magic AutoPandas, automatically converts every result into a pandas data frame. Optional, but it allows us to deal with really large data sets better in the Jupyter notebook. So it doesn't just dump 35,000 HTML rows into your Jupyter notebook and you have to try and get to the bottom of it. And then if you go here and we do this cell here that starts with SQL, that's the SQLite magic that we talked about. And it is going to connect using this special URL to this Portal MAML SQLite database here. So if you go Shift Enter on that, now it's connected to that database. And now we can start asking questions from that database. If you see connected data portals, Portal MAML SQLite, please do a yes reaction. If you can't see it, something happened, please put a no. You may have to restart your kernel by running this restart the kernel icon at the top here. If you do want to help Sam with some logging, run this cell here. You have to load this extension, configure pandas, and do that. Okay, so it looks like Courtney and Sue and Young. Courtney, yes, Sue. Can you maybe type in the chat to see what's maybe Chris can help with that. Okay, so the first thing we want to do now with this here is we can use SQL to also ask questions about the database. We can ask the metadata. Metadata is data about data. How do we know what tables are in a SQL database? Now, I didn't talk about what a table is. What we'll see now. A table is a columnar or a tabular data equivalent of a spreadsheet sheet, maybe inside the database. So if I paste this in here, and if you and I press Shift Enter, you can see that there are 3 tables. So I will paste this into here so you can copy and paste it. You can try and type it out. You'll see that what this does is it selects name from a special table inside SQLite that also hosts the tables. So we can see there these tables already exist in the database itself. So how do we get data from? Let's say I want to see all the species. Again, we use the select command. I like to indent my code like this. Star is a thing that says, show me all the fields or all the columns from species. That is your minimum viable SQL query. So if I run that, I think I am missing this. Yes, sorry, it needed 2. If you need to run a SQL query, then you need 2 of those percentage signs. Somebody fixed it for me. So there we go. That looks just like this. So if you see these, we will get into, I may not get into how you can create these tables yourself. You want to get to the joins, but there is a section in the self-paced notebooks that can show you how to do it. And there are a number of desktop tools or browser tools that you can also use a graphical user interface to manipulate your tables.
Sorry, Julian, I have a couple of questions already.
Yes.
Forgive me, some of it might be obvious to Python users.
I love obvious questions because a lot of people probably have the same question, but they're too shy to ask it.
The syntax is completely new to me. So the %% lowercase SQL is just saying.
So, okay, so that, I should clarify that. Thank you very much. So this is purely an artifact of the fact that we're running the SQL query inside a Jupyter notebook.
Okay.
So if I went to SQLite online, let me go. If I go here and I say go import, I want to open, let's see, dev, I think it's you may not be seeing what I'm seeing, but that's fine. I will show you now. I'm trying to find the data. Oh, where is it? Portal teaching DB. This one. Let me do it.
Sorry, I know I'm not trying to ask you to do something on the fly. It's harder.
Sorry,
but from here, you don't need that. It looks like you just type select.
Exactly. And normally in other tools, you do not need this percentage SQL. You only need this, but it doesn't understand this. So to run, in order to be able to run SQL and just straight in a Jupyter notebook, we have to install this extension. And and then load it. So it's a special package called IPython SQL. And that means that we can now, other than just having to have this at the top, everything else is just a normal SQL statement or SQL command.
And you're the one doing the formatting of the enter and the indent, which
yes,
you could have read that as like one blob or something.
Yes, I could have written it like this. And for really short queries like this, it doesn't really matter how the indentation works. Yeah, okay. You can have multiple queries inside a so what is the plots, and it'll work, but it'll only show the results of the last query. So as long as you have semicolons at the end of every SQL statement, then you can have multiple in the same. This works for most tools where you might be entering SQL.
And I think I just maybe fundamentally misunderstand the database itself. But when we looked over in the notebooks data folder, there's 3 CSVs and the SQLite. So the SQLite 5, whatever that extension means, and that's
the file.
That knows how to relate those 3 CSVs. This file was created by importing these 3 CSV files into that file. So if I create a new folder here and I say backup and I move this, I can delete these 3 and this will still work. It's nothing to do with the CSV files anymore. So it's that just happened to be in the same folder so that we can click and look at them.
Yes.
Basically, but it doesn't. Okay, but you can just, I was like, wait, are we? Because we happen to be.
Exactly. Thanks for pointing that out. There's a section of the self-paced notebook that shows you how to create your own database that's the equivalent of this database by using those 3 CSV files.
Okay.
But we're jumping ahead and going, well, we'll just use the provided. What about Christina asked, what about capitalizing CSV commands? Try modifying your query and see what happens. It's agnostic, but it's not great. It's not great. Try modifying the capitalization of a table. It also works. But there's like a convention to keep your SQL bits uppercase and your Young's running. Okay, SQL case uppercase and your tables and other values lowercase. All right. Now,
I have another question.
Yes.
How did you know that where did the name of the SQLite Master table come from? Like, how did you know it was SQLite Master?
This is built into the SQLite database management engine. So I just looked it up. That's the way that you can do it. Normally, if you use a desktop application in order to visualize something, you can see like the tables here. You don't have to use that special function.
But so regardless of what the SQLite file's named, you refer to the table as SQLite_master?
Yes, exactly. If I made a new database called, and I think that in the self-paced one, I call it data.db, .db or .SQLite are just common conventional extensions for those databases, but they're not, they can be anything. Yeah, so this happens to just be SQLite Master. So even if the database is called blah.db, you would still select from SQLite Master in order to see the tables. Good question. Thank you.
I have a question about the syntax of that. So it's dependent on, you must first connect to a database and then you can run the SQLite Master command.
Correct. And depending on which, you can actually connect to multiple databases in the same session. And then whichever one you're connected to, that's the SQLite Master. It will it will query. So yeah, it's the main one that's connected to.
Sorry for the slew of questions, but this is so new to me. Why is in cell 4, it's only 1% sign in front of SQL versus 2?
Yeah, if we go here, I'll show you if I go to the repository, I think, no, I don't have it there. There is the plugin extension for Jupyter called IPython SQL. It has modes. If you're just running just special things with SQL, that I want to connect to a database or do something else that is not a SQL command, then you use the single percentage sign. But anything that you send into the database, everything that happens inside a database.
Python command versus a SQL command.
Yeah, this percentage SQL, that's all the Python extension side of things, and everything below here is
actual
SQL.
SQL.
Yeah.
Well, what about, okay, sorry, what's with all the slashes? So you did in the first, in cell 4?
I'm gonna see if I do this here. Yeah, interesting. This also works on the online one with the demo notebook. Sorry, the slashes here, that is a URL scheme introduced by a Python package called SQLite. SQL Alchemy. And if this was a Postgres database, then you would connect, this might be PostgreSQL : / a database name, maybe a port because it runs over the network, or is it a port and then a database name? It could be another host, it could be running on another server. So depending on the kind of database that you connect to, this URL will be different. So this is what a URL looks like for a SQLite database locally
on your machine
in a folder right here. So it's in this data. So because the notebooks runs from here, that's where the data is. But it could be, if it was running somewhere else, then this path would be different. And then I would modify the path here.
Could you also show me how to add comments in chunks that are not code?
Yeah, okay, so that's a good question. So this is I was going to cover this later, but I may as well do it now. You can add SQL comments by using 2 hyphens. So you go select or show which tables exist in this database. And then here I can say, show me all the plots. So you can do that. And that's when queries it's always really good practice to document what your queries do, because they can get very complicated. Okay. And there's one other thing that I wanted to show, which was it's a special command that we can use in order to show you what the fields of a database looks like. So if I'll paste this in here. You can copy and paste that and try that as well. And this actually shows you, this is another special thing. It shows you the name of the field and also the type. And you can see that columns, these fields in the database can have different types. And this makes this can be important in databases. It allows you to model your columns in a way. You can see in surveys, the record ID is obviously a number, the month is a number, and species ID is a text. Yeah. So you can have these these fields can have types, and can help you restrict what bad things can happen between your. Can prevent errors. So if you wanted to actually accidentally insert, say, a string into a column that is designated as a number, it'll complain about that.
Sorry, Julian, I think I actually meant, how do I create a cell in the Jupyter notebook that is text?
A text, so that is, if you see, there, now I am on a cell here, and if I go echo hello, this is by default a Python, shush, this is by default, is it a Python cell if I don't do anything. But if I want to change it to a cell, I can select here on that, see at the top here, it says markdown, and then it's just that, and it's any markdown can then be valid, heading to some code. This is all valid markdown, so it looks like that. And that's changed. If I change this back to code, it's going to fail because that's not valid Python.
That was perfect.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't answer the actual question you asked. Yeah. Okay. And a lot of this stuff yes. There are lots of different kinds of data types, including dates. Some databases have currency data types, Boolean true or false. And across different database systems, they'll have different kinds of data types. It's good to know how the different databases represent data, but more or less it'll be very similar. And yeah, again, the self-paced, that's in the first self-paced notebook at the bottom of, I mean, actually show you. If you go to notebooks, we're working in work.ipnd, but in this first one here, you'll see it's all of the stuff we've gone through here, and you will see that there are some data types here, and then also the mapping between SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and things like that. So don't worry about that now, but yeah, you can always go back later and have a look. Okay, any questions? Just double checking to see how people are doing. Do they need a short break for refreshment or anything like that? If you do you need a break? Raise your hand. Okay, so looks like we're all ready to go. Okay, I'm going to have a sip of water. There's also some reaction, which I think can be like faster or slower. Please indicate that as well if you think I'm going too slow or I'm going too fast, and I can speed things up. Or if there are things that you don't care about, like, okay, skip this, get to the complicated joins or something like that. Don't be shy. We're here to help. Okay. So back to work. In our data folder, I should probably move these things. Yeah.
I closed, or I opened up the notes in the SQL introduction IPython notebook, and I can't get back to the work. .IPython. I don't have like tabs at the top like you do.
Oh, so at the bottom you'll see there's a simple. If you switch simple off, then you can see tabs and you can see the stuff on this side. Is this what I think I saw Sue going exactly the same thing? How do I get around? Yeah.
Yeah, that was the trick. Thank you.
I'm glad you asked. It's probably you are not the only one. Okay. So in this next section, we're going to write and build some queries, more queries, and including filters. And we're going to subset. So we've already seen, so we want to have a single column. So we've got, so do the percentage SQL, and then select, whoop, that fail. I pressed Shift Enter instead of Enter, star from surveys. So we've done this before. You see it returns all the columns. Now, because we're using a Panda data frame for the results, it skips the middle bit. So this is why I said use that thing, and it shows you all 35,548 records and all the fields. But what if I just want year? I can say I only want year, and it'll return only year. So this is like what we talked about before. It's like this is part of the recipe of if we want to have a subset of the fields. You only care about some of them. So you can specify only a single field, or you can specify, let's say I want the year and the month and the day. Try that. But let's say I only want to return, say I only want to return the first 10 records. There's this nice thing called limit that returns the first 10 records. I want to return the first 20 records. And these can be combined. So it's a, so I'll return the years for the first 20 records. So here's a question. Like, let's say I want to know what are all the species that are in the surveys table. So we know we can go species ID from species. So we have all these species. So we have, no, this is the wrong one. I want to say how many species are in the survey, are actually in the survey result. We have all these. I want to know how many of them are actually there. How many unique species are in the surveys table? And there are 35,000 records there. Any ideas? Has anybody used this before? I know Chris knows. He's just being a helper and not. Any ideas? Like how can we show only like the unique species in there? Christina says, yeah, that's optional. You only need, it's habit for me. I always put a semicolon at the end of a SQL statement. But it's, yes, Young says, is there a unique amount? There is something very similar, and it's called a distinct. So now you can see that there are 48 distinct species. There should be no, including none. So there'll be some records there that don't have, that are empty. So that's interesting. How many species were in here? 54. Okay, so not all the species, 49. Oh, I see. So Jessica says, but how do we count? That's a good question. So what you can do is to go, I think, do you mean how many of each or of total? I'm trying to think.
Sorry, that's probably off topic. I would have said 48 too, except I've just told myself the index starts on 0. So when you see it end in 48, there's actually 49, but I would make that error a lot. So, but yeah, sorry, that's taking us off your curriculum.
But is none a species, or is it something that was attempted to be collected in the data set?
Well, in that case, 48 is still only correct by incorrectly, if you will.
Yeah. It's actually 40. Yeah, it's 48 species and one is none. Yeah. And you'll see that there are 54 species in our species database. So there are species. So we don't even know what the overlap is, right? There may be species in the surveys that don't exist in the species table. And maybe there's probably definitely species in the species table that are not in the surveys table. Okay.
How do you know when to put parentheses around things and when they're not needed?
Good question. I usually just put parentheses for the distinct. Maybe Chris, do you know when that is a thing and when it isn't a thing?
Some of these things, such as count, are actual functions, and so you're making a function call. And so you need the parentheses around it.
So the other one, the ones that you don't need, well, distinct, is that a function?
No, that's a keyword.
So the ones that you don't, okay, so there's keywords and functions and there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And by function, just to get, if anyone is particular, there's procedures and functions are actual separate things in a database. So I was using the term function as something that's callable.
And we can also do distinct pairs or combinations of things. So if we wanted to see the distinct, like which years and which species were surveyed in those years, we can do this. And then we can see in 1977, these species were, and unfortunately, the way that it displays it, it's not super useful. Let's see if I can go. No, somewhere there's a cut off about how many it starts. Yeah, so you can see in 1977, there were, looks like 13 species were surveyed, including, and then some surveys that didn't have the species.
So when I run this command with parentheses for the distinct, it returns an error.
Really?
Distinct should be a built-in.
Yeah, I don't know why it worked for you and not for me, but I think it should. Well,
so it worked with one column name, but not multiple.
Oh, but not with multiple. Okay, interesting.
These parentheses are still seeming very mysterious.
Yeah,
You weren't making a call at that point. You were doing a grouping.
I should probably not have. I probably like messed it up by having parentheses at all. Just don't. Yeah, sorry about that. I don't think it needs parentheses.
Yeah, what you're trying to do is return all the unique rows that have year and species ID, and so you want to just use distinct on that way, not on any column or any particular type.
Okay, thank you, Chris, the database expert here. Okay. So one thing we may want to do is, if we want to find the weight of, the species in a survey. Oh, where is this now? Here. Okay, select star. It's like star from surveys. So we have that. So we want to, this weight is in grams, I think. This looks like it's probably in grams. Yeah, Christina's nodding. But what if I want to have it in kilograms? So if I go select year, month, day, species, ID, and weight, I'm going to get this. What if I want the weight in kilograms? How would I do this? you can do math, quite a lot of math in SQL. So you probably want to divide the weight by 1,000, right, to go from grams to a kilogram. Let's try it. If we just go that looks like it there. So if I add, make sure, if I paste this in here and I take that away, actually, like what I can do is I can do both, right? I think I can do weight and weight divided by, yeah. You can see it's the weight in grams and the weight as kilograms.
Hey, Julian, I'm having a technical difficulty getting a new cell. For some reason, I can't.
You can click,
at the bottom.
Yeah, you can press, if you get press on this one, this little plus icon, it'll add a new cell.
Okay, sometimes it happens automatically and sometimes it
Yeah,
doesn't.
if I press Shift Enter and then I keep pressing Shift Enter, it'll keep adding cells to the bottom.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we are an hour and a half in, about. We've only done about an hour of teaching because of the setup and things. How are people feeling? Do they want to keep going for another half hour and then take a break and then come back for the second half? So say thumbs up or the green check mark if you are okay, red if you need a break, the reactions. So if you are okay, please put a green reaction. If you need to take a break, please put a red reaction. And if you don't do anything, I'm going to assume you're okay to go on. Yes, yes, Courtney's yes. How are you, Ryan? You need a break? Ryan's good. Jessica, Young. Okay, I'm going to say yes. Okay. But that, let's do a little bit more count. Oh, interesting. Jessica says it doesn't create a new cell for her. I wonder if you have a problem with your notebook. You have to use the plus. Okay, so let's do a query, a challenge. I want you to write a query that returns the year, month, species ID, and the weight in milligrams. So on your own time, I'll give you a few minutes. See if you can write a query that returns the year, month, day, the species ID, and the weight in milligrams, as opposed to kilograms. So just to remind yourself, this is what we had before. This gives you the weight in kilograms. And once you have it, you've got it figured out, put the green reaction Ryan's got it, Sam's got it, Sue has it, Jessica has it, Courtney, Jung may be in another meeting, I'm not sure. Jung, are you there?
No, I am, but I'm having trouble with the last one where you changed it to kilograms. For some reason, that didn't work for me.
What do you see?
I just see the SQLite, no such table, survey. Oh, you know, I typed in survey, not surveys.
Yeah, I've done that.
What a silly mistake. All right.
Okay, so does somebody want to paste in their query that they got into the HackMD in the challenge section? Right here. Go for it. Somebody uploaded. An image. Yep. So if I run this, oh, so I should say this and add a comment here. Weight in kilograms. And this is yeah, that's right. Okay.
Can you rename that column on the fly, as it were?
Yes, you can. That's a really good question. We're going to get to that. We may as well do it now. There we go. Weight in kilograms. Thank you for asking. See how fast we're going through this? Inquisitive minds. Okay. So let's say we want to find only the surveys for the species DM. So this one. So which one is that? I don't know what DM is. Is that well, one of the kangaroo rats anyway? And so it's going to be cute. So if we want to go select, we're going to find all the data in this surveys. But only for the species DM. And we use this thing called where. And so let's see, species, so DM, so this is species ID there. We want to find all the records here where the species ID is like this, DM. We can do this. Species ID equals DM. So you can see there are only 10,595 records.
How can we exclude the ones that don't have measurements?
That was also going to come up. We may as well do that now. Okay, so let's say I want to select from, we can combine these filters. Like, so I want to show all the surveys for the species VM equals, you go and let's see. So what we say, we want to say the weight. So there's both the two kinds of measurements, right? There's hind foot length and there's weight. Do you want to find the ones that don't have weight but have hind foot length, or hind foot length and no weight, or neither? That's like a different thing. Let's start with the ones that don't have any weight. What you can do is you can go where weight. Let's try, I think it's this. Oh no, these returns the one that where the weight is empty. So we can go is not null. So you can see this 10,595 there, 10,200. So we've excluded the ones where we don't have where we don't have a weight. So these are the ones that have weights. So this is a special thing.
The weight column originally had both NaNs and none. And it looked like the is null was only selecting the nones. So what's going on with that?
I think it's because this might be a SQLite specific thing. I think it's because when a null value is converted into a, remember when we up here and we showed like, what is the structure of the surveys table? This one. And we can see that the weight is a floating value, type value. And when a null value is converted, or SQL will try to go, okay, well, this value, null, how do I convert that into a number? And then it says not a number. That's why we see the not a number thing. So you'll see that these are the null ones. Let me just double check. So 0. Yeah, go to the top. Yeah, so you can see that these are empty. When these are empty, they're nulls on the database level. And when they're converted to a floating value, they show up as not a number. So we can exclude those not a numbers, and nulls are essentially the same thing.
So the is null is capturing both none and NaNs. NaNs are no value.
NaN is no. NaN is you can also get NaN when you divide by 0 or something like that. Maybe I can't remember. There's like various ways to get to not a number, but we'll most likely see it in when the SQLite tries to what's the word? I forgot there's a name for it, but it coerces it or something. Tries to coerce a value into like a type. And when you can't coerce null into float in SQLite, it says not a number. I don't know how to do this. Instead of saying 0 or some other invalid thing, because it's not 0, because 0 is actually a valid number.
Yeah.
But good question.
I tried replacing the equal sign with capital is, and that worked, or it seemed to work.
So sorry, which
the equal
this
sign
next slide
seemed to work. Yeah. So
I've never tried that.
when do you use is and when do you use equal, and are they always equivalent, or does it depend on the data, like the type, whether it's a floating or an integer or what have you?
That's a good. Now I don't even know how to like do it in here. No, okay. So it seems. Oh, okay. I think is maybe could be an okay. I think my hypothesis is that is an alias for equals, and the reason this doesn't work. The reason this doesn't work, which is because null can't be compared to itself. So the only way just to check if something is null is by using is null. Sorry, is not null. You have to use the is not when you're comparing against null. If you're comparing to other values, it looks like you can use is or the equals.
Okay. And then I also tried, I think single quotes versus double quotes. I think it needs single.
Yeah, I think some different databases are finicky about this. I think in PostgreSQL, for example, you have to use.
Did that just work?
It did work, yeah.
So I guess it doesn't matter.
Not for SQLite.
It's dependent on the database.
I think Postgres, for example, I don't know about MySQL, you need to use one or the other, and then
Single.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, if you go with single, you should be okay.
Christina found a link in the chat about.
Yeah, they're not exactly the same.
Yeah, I think is can take a regular expression, can it?
That's a good question.
Can't you say like is starting something, like if it doesn't have to be an exact match?
Somebody try it. So I pasted something into the references there about what it says about the is versus equals operator. I'm going to keep trucking. Unless there's any questions about this. So we want to find out all the surveys after the year 2000. Any ideas how we might do this? We're going to use the where again. And something about the year. What are we going to do here? from the year 2000 onwards. So we want to have 2000, 2001, and 2002. How would we do that? Jessica types into the chat. How about that? Yes, that worked. 5,391 records starting in the year 2000 and ending in 2002. So you can use numeric comparators like that. Likewise, you can have bigger than, which will 2001, so any year after that. And you can use smaller than. So what if we want to find all the surveys for the species DM from the year 2000 onwards? Remember that and that we used before? That makes sense. Try typing that in. Do you see? So you can start asking all kinds of interesting questions about these surveys. So I've got a challenge for you. I'm going to add it here in the challenges. Take a few minutes. See if you can produce a table listing the data or a selection, a result that lists all the data for all individuals in plot 1 that weighed more than 75 grams, showing the date, the species ID, and the weight in kilogram. And then what I like to do here is you can start your cell. I'll start you off. And then all individuals in plot 1. And see how I break the things down? You can start with returning everything, like break your problem down. That's what I often do is so the first thing is, who knows how to get all the individuals in plot 1? When you have it, or you have, if you have something that you want to paste somewhere, you think you've completed it, put a green reaction checkbox on your Zoom. React with a green checkmark reaction once you've got it. So we're going to select from the surveys. What are we going to select? We know we have to do that. So we have to select something from surveys, right? What are we going to select? We know we need the date. So we'll start you off that. So we need the year, month, day.
And the species ID?
and the species ID. And we need the weight in kilograms, right? Which was
divided by 1,000.
By 1,000.
Do the as.
So now we have, oh yeah, so now we've done this, right? So we've got the date, the species ID, and the weight in kilograms. So we've done this. Now we have to go plot one. We have two things. It says we need to find all the surveys that are taken in plot one that where the weight was more than 75 grams. Which order would you like to take this in? So remember, you're going to use where to filter. What's the easiest one? So we have two things, right? So here is a way that we could say, give me the species ID something. So let's look at the surveys. So we have a plot ID. We could probably do something similar. And so we could say plot ID equals 1. And we know how to compare, say, if something is bigger than some kind of value. And here's in this query, we said select where the year is bigger than 2000. So that should be, so we need, so something about plot ID, something, something, and weight, something, something. What goes in there? Who wants to, anybody pasted any answers into the challenge yet? When you're ready, see if you can paste your result in there. What I like to do is I might comment some of these things out and just make sure that I actually get the right. So I get the right columns back, but I still need to filter.
So do you not need to select plot ID if you're going to filter by plot ID?
No, you don't. That's a really good question. Yeah. So what happens is that the select is the last bit that happens in the chain of events. It takes the data that you're returning and then it says, okay, I only want to return these. So the querying, the where and the filtering happens on these things, the from. And then the very last thing as well, okay, I don't actually need the plot ID, I just wanted all the other results. But that's a good question. And that's covered a little bit later as well. But if you weren't sure, you could definitely add. So let's say, let's add the plot, right? Maybe we want to like double check that this thing actually works. I'm always paranoid that I've done something silly and it's not returning the right thing. So how would I check? Any suggestions for how I would check that the plot ID? Like so. So it looks good, right? And how do I check if the weight is bigger than 75 grams? We don't have to do any conversions, right? Because these weights are already in grams. That's why we divided by 1,000 to get kilograms. So how would I see? I could do, well, what was the question?
75.
More than 75 grams.
It was interesting. I was wondering if you needed to still filter out the NaNs or the nulls, but apparently you don't. Like doing that takes out the NaNs, even though NaN is neither greater than nor less than 75.
Right. If we want, if we said, well, all the ones with smaller than that, the NaNs also don't show up.
Yeah. So NaN is just like it's
not a number.
Category,
can't even compare it to other numbers. If you can't compare it to a number, then it can't be bigger or smaller than any number or equal to any number.
Oh, okay, cool.
Good question. Yeah, that null is useful, is both confounding and useful depending on on what you need. Okay. So does that all make sense? Any questions? Okay. We're going to do a little bit more complicated queries now. So let's say that we wanted to find all the surveys for all 3 Dipodemus species from the year 2000 onwards. Do I have this right from the year? Yeah, onwards. So I want to get all the data. Yeah, so we're going to go again, select star from surveys. Where, and so now we need species ID. And so the 3 Dipodemus species are we can see it here. DM, DO, and DS. Well, that's interesting, the way I pasted there. How will we do this? Any suggestions? What can we use? So we go equals. You know how to do that. How did it not return anything? What am I doing wrong? Oh,
DM, not 12, right? I don't know.
No, you're absolutely right.
What's the equivalent here of like percent in percent?
Say that again.
Well, in R, I use percent in percent to say where species
So you can go
belongs to this set.
species in.
Oh, just in then. Okay.
Yep. A lot of this stuff translates to Young asks, is pipe, the vertical pipe, the logical OR? No. But you can use this, you can just write it out. So if you go, this is another way you can do it. You go species ID equals DM, or species ID equals DS, or species ID equals DO. Returns exactly the same result. So those are equivalent.
What about regular expressions? Couldn't you condense that down into like one line with regular expressions?
So there's a, yes, you can, there's like a string matching one. This is kind of tricky. So let's say we add another, this is how you can get burnt, because what if you add a species, you can do something. Same again. So that says if the species ID string is like, starts with a D and then ends with something. It's not quite a regular expression. It's more like a simple text matching. There are ways to do regular, more clever regular expression matching, but we won't cover that. But yeah, good point. Yeah, that's also a good way of doing it. This is pretty good for text matching, but yeah, let's say somebody adds a Dipodemus. Let's say somebody adds a species that starts with a D and is not a Dipodemus species later on, and now your queries are wrong, right? So there's a more reliable way of doing this. So let's do that. I'm going to go straight to join. So coming up to a break, I'm going to show you how to join across tables. because let's say that somewhere down the line, we add a row here and add another Dipodemus. Oh gosh, I already missed it, right? Actually, I did miss it. I made a mistake. I assumed that there were only 3 Dipodemus species, but there are actually 4. This is a good example. And I would expect this to return 6,167, 6,000, so they're actually return, there's extra 40 rows because this picked up a species that I did not have, which is DX. Nobody told me that I was missing one. Okay. But we can turn this to our advantage by going, let's say that I was working with this from the assumption that there were only 3 of these species. Now somebody has added this extra species, but I want my query to still work for the whole genus, no matter which species it is. If some new species is determined, or some species determined to be actually 2 separate species and things change, all of this happens, right? Okay, so I want to find all the surveys for this genus, but this genus doesn't show up in here, only the species does. So this is where we start combining data sets. Let's do it. We have minutes left before the break. So see if I can do this. Select star from, and so we definitely want surveys, right? And we also want, somehow we want to bring the species in here. So we use the thing called join species, and then go on surveys dot species ID equals species dot ID. Whoopsie, got the wrong dots and the wrong thing. This is how I say I want to join these 2 tables. So where this species ID, I want to join it with this table on the species ID over here. I'm pointing at my finger and you can't see. So there. So what happens if we just do this? Now we get our surveys and we get the species stuff as well. So now we have a genus and a taxa that we didn't have before, and the species name and the species ID. Species ID you see shows up twice here because this comes from the species. This one here comes from the species table, and this one here comes from the surveys table, and they should be the same. Incidentally, you'll notice that there are less than 35,000 because there are some surveys for either there are some surveys for species that don't exist in the species table, or there are surveys for things that we don't know what the species is. Okay, but we want to, well, let's say we want to find all the ones where the genus is Dipodemus, right? So let's modify the
Is Julian frozen for everyone else?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see if he comes back in a minute.
Oh,
Mine's been freezing on and off, so.
okay. Hopefully this still works.
Julian, you froze for 30 seconds to a minute.
Hopefully it didn't matter. I think my Jupyter notebook also got disconnected, so I don't think this is going to work. I'm going to restart here. I'm going to restart, and I'm going to go back to the top, and I'm going to enable my logger. Yep, and then I'm going to connect to the database. Oh, I need to load the extension, and I need to configure Magic Pandas, and then I connect to the database. Okay, I'm going to go back down to the bottom. Okay. And so I want to see if this works. Yes. So you can see there are now 16,167 results. Where before, with my query that assumed, which is actually the same one that Ryan suggested, which is where the species string started with D. So that's a good sanity check. And it's more than the ones where we said the species ID equals one of those three. So that is a nice sanity check for our data. And so what we've done now, we've now joined surveys with species, and then we can filter on a field in the second table. So let's say
I only did genus equals. Does it make any? I mean, I don't think it's any different.
It does not. Yeah, it only matters if there are fields that are called the same in two tables. Then you have to disambiguate it. Let's say there was something called, I don't know, ID or something sort of generic field in both surveys and in species. Then you would have to say, I want to filter on the species.genus table. But
okay,
yes,
so then when it came together, it would remember which of the ID columns came from which original table. But the join only outputs everything that it's in common.
Correct. There are other kinds of joins.
It's only the overlap. There's
you can do things
that don't have species.
So let's say you can do a left join. I think it's a left outer join.
Oh boy.
I know.
Well, now you're filtering by species, so I think that's why it's not any different.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yes, ignore it. There are ways to say, show me all the surveys where, say, species is not equal to something, including ones that'll return ones that even if there isn't a species and there's a reading for a species, it'll return those rows.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you.
And so actually that's another one. Let's find all the readings where there I wonder if there is something I was wondering since I've been talking this whole time. I wonder if there are any surveys for species that aren't in the species table. Where species.g, the species.species ID is null. This is how I would do it. There are 763 rows where it seems either the species ID doesn't exist, or it's some value that doesn't exist in the species table. So that's how you can do it. You use this left outer join. This is a little bit advanced. I think it's covered in some of the self-paced things. But yes, all kinds of way you can say, okay, well, does all of this make sense? Like, am I sure that I'm looking at the data that I'm thinking I'm looking at? Don't worry too much about that. Now, one of the most common things that you will need to do is sorting. So now we're coming up. So now we're at 1 o'clock. We have an hour left, and I promised a break. You don't have to take a whole lunch break. So but I'd like some indication before we get on to the last more complicated bit of the workshop, whether you need a refresher, maybe some caffeine or something. I'm going to enforce at least a 5-minute break. So you get to choose how long your break is. I'm going to survey. Please put it here in your HackMD. I want to say break requirement minimum 5 minutes. Julian, 5 minutes. Please say your preference for a break there. Jessica says 15. You don't have to put your name there either, actually, if you want to go anonymous. Lunch. Ryan wants lunch. Maximum. Okay. 20 minutes. Okay. Ryan, can you get away with a 20-minute lunch? You can eat at the computer. Yes. Okay. We will be grossed out. Okay, we'll see you here at 1:22. if there's anybody wants to stay along and ask some questions, I will be back in 5 minutes. I'll let the Zoom run. I'll see you here in 20 minutes and we'll cover some of the other advanced topics. We can probably stop the recording while lunch is going.
Yeah, I can just push.
Is the right one. Thank you very much.
Brian lost. Oh, people who lost their binder instances.
Yeah,
Would
that's the
be
problem.
Reloaded?
Yeah, I would. I think even reloading probably wouldn't work. They may have to go back to the link.
And that means I've lost all the code that we typed earlier, right?
Yes. I think we did post some of it into the HackMD, which is probably a good thing to keep doing.
Most of it is packed. I tried to get most of it in there.
Thank you very much,
Thanks.
Chris.
If you've been logging, I've got it too. That's one way to get.
That's true. So yeah, Sam's logging software will have all of that somewhere. Okay. It looks like we have everybody back. Okay, so as you may have lost your binder, it may not be working. Please go to the top of the HackMD and click on the launch binder. It'll take a little while. Okay, so once you have see this, you may have to uncheck the simple view so you can see multiple tabs. It's at the bottom. I'll increase my screen so you can see what I'm doing. And then if you want to have your work log to help the workshop facilitators, please run, you'll have to run all the cells, make directory the logger. I just clicked on that thing on the side and then start the workshop. The database will probably also be gone, so you'll need to run this mkdir to create the directory and copy the data files over, and load the SQL extension, configure the SQL extension to return pandas data frames by default, and then connecting to the portal mammals dataset. So once you have that, could you please put a green check mark as a reaction? And if you're stuck for any reason, please put a red cross. Oops. Okay. So in the last half hour or so of this workshop, I'm going to go through some of the things you'll need to do in order to those more complicated aggregations and grouping of data. And we talked about this here. If you wanted to answer some of these questions, like how is the hind foot length and how is the hind foot? Ooh, that's not the right one. How has the hind foot length and weight of the Dipodemus species changed over time? And what's the average weight of each species per year? And as we can have to combine different tables in that way. And what information can I learn about the Dipodemus species in the 2000s over time? So we're going to get to those things. Okay, let's see that at the bottom here. move these down. So looks like if you can remove your green checkboxes, if you have it, I will remove this. Okay, we're going to go do some more now. Okay. So we're going to learn about how to use functions like aggregation functions like minimum, maximum. We've seen average. Maybe we haven't seen average. Sum, count, things like that, and using some of those aliases a bit more. So let's make sure everything this works. Just run a query here. SQL select star from surveys. It returns things. Make sure that that looks like that. If you don't see this, please put a red cross. Let's say we want to see how many surveys there are. We looked at, came across count before, and weren't sure if it was a function or a statement. Whoopsie, I typoed that. Using counts like this will tell you how many records there are in this table. And I don't know how useful this is, but let's say we wanted to find the total weight of all the animals. It's the readings of all the animals over time in grams. Like that is the total weight. Is that, am I reading that like 1,300 kilograms of rodents have been lifted on Portal? It seems like what it's saying. Probably not super most useful value, but yeah. Let's say I want to know how much this is in kilogram. I'm going to go as number of, what would you call that? As number of surveys divided by 1,000 as total rodents lifted in kg. All right, yeah. Let's say we want to find this to the, I'm not going to go talk about round. Okay, let's say I want to, the challenge for you, write a query that returns the total weight, average weight, minimum and maximum weights for all animals caught over that. I'm going to paste this into the HackMD. So write a query that returns the total weight, average weight, minimum and maximum weights for all animals caught over the duration of the survey. And to help you with some of that, I'll give you a clue that there are min, max, and AVG are all functions you can use. So you've got to take a couple of minutes, see if you can write a query. I want to change this into a markdown cell. So we know how to do total weight, right? We can do this. How do we do average minimum weight I'll start you off. I don't like that comma unless you do something. Who's figured it out? Minimum and maximum weight. Ryan's got it. Jessica Young. Excellent. So excellent. Everybody's got it. Okay. So somebody post Sam entered. Somebody paste their query in here in the HackMD. Do the thing. Let me try that. What have I done? Select. Oh, I'm missing my. Okay. Yep. And I like how you use the labels as minimum weight to indicate what it is. Average weight and the maximum weight. Very good. Any questions about that? Wasn't clear?
Not a question about that. I was wondering if I was trying a few different things with count. I was like, could we count, say, the number of years that are in the survey? But when I put years inside the count, it didn't do anything different. So there must be some other way.
No, that's on topic as well. So thank you.
Ah.
So let's say we wanted to find out the number of years in the survey. Do you remember when we used the distinct? So we go select distinct year from surveys. You can see that there are 26 years. I think, now this is where my, is it count?
Yes.
I finally managed to combine count and distinct in the same query. And the same way we could go, what is the number of species in the survey? That was another thing I wasn't sure about before. What is the number of distinct species in the survey? Whoopsie. And I think, so I would do something like species ID in survey. Yeah, 48. You see, I can ask all kinds of interesting questions I want to get back into plots, species, surveys. Any other questions that you might want to ask about? Because so far, the questions you've asked, like all the questions you've all asked are very on topic and pretty much what I want to teach anyway. So you know, participant-driven learning based on your interests definitely help.
What if I want to know the number of combinations of, say, species, ID, and year?
It's a good challenge. Okay, so we've done something similar to that before, where we could find the combination. Where did we have that? Like a distinct. You can do a distinct pairing of things. Here we go. So that gave us years and species. And I think I would do something like this. No, help. How would I do this? Any ideas? I know if I do this, I will get, oh, no, that's the wrong thing.
There's an answer in the chat.
I don't know if it's an answer, but I was maybe missing the first part. You wanted the distinct for each of them, distinct count, or just like a distinct pairing?
I think that's what Jessica was saying, is like the distinct species per year, maybe species per year, right? So,
oh, okay. So the pairing. Okay.
So what I might do is, and I think without doing it, so if you select, sorry, there's like the group by. So if you select the, count star, comma, species ID, year from surveys, group by species ID, year.
We haven't gotten to group by yet. So this is good. This is where we're going next. That looks.
And then year.
Group by species, yeah, year and species ID.
Yeah, and then above.
We don't need distinct.
You don't need distinct, but then add count star as n.
And that's a very good idea. Thank you, David. Ooh, that's nice.
Like that.
It's nice and slow. It's probably because it's not.
That doesn't give you the count of unique pairs, though, does it? That gives you how many.
Yeah, that's how many
how many surveys per year and species you did.
Okay, so actually, that's not a bad answer to get, right? So in 1977, what this means is not what we were actually asking for, but what we got was in 1977 for the DM species, there were 264 weighings or measurements, readings. In the same year for the DO species, there were 12. And that's because of this group by thing where we kind of bucket the result. What we can.
if you want to count those pairs, I can't think of a way to do it without doing. I put an answer in the chat, but you can do it with a count of a already, like you group by the year and species ID, and then just do a count of that. Table. That's not, you know.
Yeah, what Samuel's got there is like a subquery. You can actually, instead of querying from a table, you can use the results of a query and then query from that. Let's see.
Right, that's like counting the number of rows that's in this answer right here, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, right, sorry, that. But yes, what David suggested there is probably more a very common or useful thing to have.
Yeah. And what I'm not sure of is where the end of these parentheses, oh, it's after the species ID. Okay, now I see it. So that's count. Yeah, and actually it's the same that we get there, right? 500 and
yeah, you'll get the same number because that's you still got the unique rows, so there'll be 535. You just counted them all.
Yeah.
So, which is good.
Cool.
Julian is frozen again? For other people? Okay. Hopefully he comes back in a minute. Oh, he got bumped entirely. Okay.
So looking at that query, you instead of doing the group by, you could also do the distinct in the subquery.
Yeah, that would work too. Yeah, you just select distinct year and species ID, right?
Yeah, similar to how we did before.
I feel like there should be a way to get the count one without having to do a subtable, but
my apologies, the university Wi-Fi just went. So I'm on my cell phone. Okay, sorry, could somebody make me a host again so I can share my screen? Thank you. Okay, my apologies. Hopefully this works. Let me just see if this still does this thing. Yeah, my notebook is still there. This one, on the other hand. So this is a similar query that tells us how many species over all the years were counted for each year. So regardless of the year, show me the number of measurements, surveys per species for the entire life of the data set so far. And we're grouping by what this group by does is it says what field or fields do we want to use to aggregate the data. And as we said before, if you want to group by multiple fields, then you would give the fields separated by commas. So you can say like grouped by year and species, it's 16 for no species at all. For the DM species, it's 264 in 1977. And if you add those up for 1977, for this species over all the years, you'll get that. What if we wanted to, for example, see how many readings per year, regardless of the species? Then we would do something like year grouped by year. So you can see that in 1977, there were 503 readings, 1978, You can see how it varies over the years. So one thing that might also be useful is, let's say I want to find all of these, but in descending order. I want to find out I want to order by I want to order by the count, not by the year. You can see that it goes from smallest to largest. So you can see how 1977 had the fewest readings and 1997 had the most readings by using this. And that is the same as if ASC tells you to order it in ascending order, which is the default sort order. Let's say we wanted to have descending order, then we would do that. And I want to add a cell here. It tells me what this was. I hope, please copy and paste these to Markdown in case we have a tragic crash again. So it was just this surveys per year, descending order by number of surveys. So I have a little challenge here. How many individuals were counted in each year in total? Actually, I think we already did that. Yep, that was that one. Scratch that. Oh man, I don't know how to do this one. How many were counted each year for each different species? Do people understand what that question means and any ideas of how you would do that? So obviously we need the year, the species ID, and the count. Try it. So we need the year, species ID, and we need some sort of count, right? In fact, I don't think we have that yet. And then we need some sort of group by. Who has an answer? I'm going to paste this challenge into.
There's one posted, it looked like.
In the chat or in the HackMD?
Yeah. In the chat.
I have to find the chat. There we go. Young. see. What she says is count star as count in year. So I like your naming convention better. From surveys, group by species ID. And just for good measure, she orders it by the count in year in descending order. Nice. Okay.
I mean, maybe I interpreted the question differently.
I think that's right. Does that seem right? Group by species ID. Oh, I think maybe there's something missing here. I think our group by, that seems very large. And actually those numbers, would it not be that?
Oh, I think you're right. There was too few then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so in 2002, for this species, there were 892 measurements. I think that's what this means.
Right.
Yeah.
That could go in the MD.
So there's this second challenge. We can actually do this, I believe. Now that we have that, I forgot a comma. I do that a lot. So what we have there is now we have actually something that's pretty useful, right? We can see that we have for this species PB in this year, we measured this many individuals, and that was the average weight.
If you order by species ID, by year and species ID, you would see how each species changes over the years.
Yep. And you can sort by multiple. You can sort first by year, then by species. Okay, see you around. Yeah, we have about 5 minutes left. So what have I done?
Species ID.
Thank you. And so unfortunately, we only see, like, because of how pandas does this thing, but we can go, let's say we want to go where I think we have to put, whoopsie. So I'm going to limit it to a particular species where species ID equals DM. So we can have something more sensible. So now we can see, based on the year, each year, you can see how the average weight has gone up. See, or well, I would probably have to see that plotted out. And I think this might be a good place to ask questions. Why are they getting better?
Order of things.
Yes.
I just tried to, I wanted to filter out the weights that were NA. I don't know why. I guess it doesn't get counted into the average weight anyways.
I don't think so, no.
But when I had the where statement after group by, it didn't like it. And when I moved it to before group by, it was fine. So is there like it must be select and then from and then where and then anything else? Or
So that's an excellent question, because depending on where you need to filter. So let's say I'm going to create a situation where you go let's take this out where species ID equals, if you try and do this here after the group by, it's going to fail.
Yeah, I didn't know why. Because
So
their species ID is still there.
yes. So what happens is you have to use having. After a group by, you have to use something called having. So, but otherwise it works exactly the same as where. And this used to trip me up all the time. And I randomly would try things until it worked.
I'm gonna get a little more technical. Each of those are words that have different effects, and the order of them is very important. So you can't just substitute all the time a having for a where. But yes, it does work in this case.
Yeah, and so in this case, particularly what it means is, we talked about earlier about when we, I think Courtney asked, well, we were filtering on a field, but we didn't actually have it in the fields that we selected. And I said it was because of the order of execution.
Yeah,
and so,
I remember that.
And so select happens second last. I think ordering happens last. And then, so it's, filtering happens first, then sorting, then ordering, then grouping, then having. So you can, having applies to once you have a grouped result, basically. So I could have here, I could have a where and a having in the same thing. I can go where plot ID equals 1, for example. If I only want to see for things in plot ID, and if I took this out, it would, you'll see what happens. It'll have everything, it'll have all the species ID. But if I want to actually filter the grouped result, then I would use this having. And the self-paced notebook has some examples about that.
Okay, so it's not so much, well, it is sometimes the order that you write it in, but the order that you write it in is not the same order that it executes in.
Yes, yes, just to make things tricky.
Okay. And you can group by and or filter by and have those, like unless you specify in your select that they show up, you won't even, like you can, it looks like just a column, like, oh, here are all the mean weights, but really you had a where equals or where plot ID equals 1. So you were limiting yourself to plot ID equals 1, but plot ID doesn't automatically show up in the result. So unless you're clear in your documentation of what happened, that piece of information is gone forever.
Yes, exactly. And that's why it's really good to document in comments or in some other way. Exactly why, like, what are you trying to do? What answer are you trying to answer? What questions are you trying to answer? Let me quickly show you. So if you, in this same repository, go to some of these other notebooks, these are notebook versions of the data carpentry SQL for Ecologist course. And except that in this one, you can just step through and you'll cover a lot of the stuff that we went through, including how to create databases, importing CSV files. And I think that we have some things here. Oh, even like that. And I think in the basic queries, we have things like limiting, more calculations. On aggregation, there are all kinds of ways that we can aggregate. Count, group by, we covered. Having, what we didn't cover was views. It's like if you commonly do like a certain result set that you want to keep having over and over again, you can create essentially a calculated table that has a query underneath it. And then you can select from that as if you were selecting from a table. That's in there. That's very handy. And then the last one is all about joins and getting quite fiddly. So definitely have a look at this. And so I think at this time, any final questions before I plug ways for you to get in touch with us? It's been a pleasure doing this. Thank you very much for showing up. And thank you very much for Christina and Chris and Sam for helping out. And yeah, we'll probably run either something like this or maybe focusing on more advanced SQL queries in the future, and especially based on your feedback, the pre-survey feedback as well as the post-survey feedback will ask you for what more would you have liked to learn? Maybe other databases, maybe Postgres or MySQL or Microsoft SQL Server, to see how it compares. We always do a compare and contrast running the same queries in different databases. Either look at maybe views, calculated views, or how do I go back and forth between Python and SQL, or R and SQL. All of these things are possible just based on what your needs are and what sort of things you want to work with. I was going to mention there's also geospatial extensions to both SQLite and Postgres. So if you need to do geospatial queries, which is very common, like, you know, show me the all the points within this polygon region or something like that. You know, if you want to do survey data, things like that based on area, that's also possible. So could Christina, would you mind telling people about the office hours and other ways to contact us?
Yeah, so do you want to, let me share my screen. I might just be able to kick you. So yeah, the best way to see what our group is doing is on our UA website, which is here, which hopefully somebody can post in the chat. So yeah, we have our contact page with David runs our group, and then we also have contacts for each of us individuals there. And then also, yeah, we have our office hours. So every Tuesday morning from 8 to 10, we go into this funky online space called GatherTown and basically just hang out and chat and help talk with people about their problems or just whatever cool is happening in sort of the general data science-y software engineering space. So yeah, feel free to come join us. Yeah, the link's right here. Am I forgetting anything else about that, Julian?
No, I think that's it. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's feel free to let us know if there's anything else you would like to learn in this space. Oh, it's also the Research Bazaar, which Jessica and Christina and I are also involved in as a community here, and we have Coffee and Code, which overlaps with office hours on Tuesday mornings, and we also have Hacky Hour on Thursday afternoons at Snakes and Lattes near the university main gate from 4 to 7 p.m. And we get together and work on data science problems and generally just socialize.
Yeah, that's ways to stay engaged. So.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming, and I hope this will help you in the future.
Thank you so much, Julian.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Julian.